Hey, check out my sweet ride. I named her Mia Lightning. Pretty slick, huh? But this car isn't just about speed and style. It's our ticket to exploring a decade that truly transformed America. Before we hit the road, let's think back for a moment. We've learned about the world right after World War II, when soldiers came home and the Fair Deal promised jobs, healthcare, and civil rights. Pause here to predict. How do you think these changes impacted how average Americans lived? It's all right if your answer isn't perfect. We'll discover more about this decade on the road. In today's journey, we'll start by cruising the suburbs. We'll then take a pit stop to discover the factors that led to prosperity in the 1950s. We'll reach our destination as we uncover this decade's cultural changes and challenges. Why, this decade's dynamic. It's iconic. It's economic. Why, it's the fabulous 50s. Welcome to the suburbs, the heart of the American dream in the 1950s. This dream is an ever-changing vision of what success looks like for the average American. How would you describe the American dream today? The American dream can look different to everyone today. Maybe you said it's living in an apartment with a cat. That sounds great to me. In the 1950s, however, the American dream was more well-defined. A white picket fence in front of a nice house where mom stays home with the 2 children. A family car that dad can take to work and on family road trips. Let's park here for a moment to explore how this dream became a reality for many Americans. One leading factor was the rise of planned communities that were the blueprint for modern suburbs, specifically designed for returning veterans. One example of these neighborhoods were Levittowns, built on the idea of mass production, similar to how cars were manufactured. Levittowns offered affordable housing by using only a few designs for all homes. This approach made it possible to construct homes quickly and efficiently, drastically reducing costs. What made suburbs like Levittowns thrive wasn't just affordable housing. Roads and highways were expanded and improved, making it easier than ever for residents to live further from their jobs. This helped transform cars from a luxury into a necessity, as people began to use them to commute from their suburban neighborhoods to work in the cities. Cars like Mia Lightning became a part of American culture and the landscape around it. There was another big push toward suburbia, the baby boom, a time when families started having children at a much higher rate. More babies meant the need for bigger houses. Families flocked to these new neighborhoods like Levittowns, where they could find homes for their growing families. But what was it about suburbia that was so appealing? Well, think about it. If you had to provide for a family of 4 and had the choice between a small, cramped apartment and a quiet, spacious home with a yard for the same price, what would you choose? Many people in the 50s began to choose suburbia because it promised safety, space, and community for an affordable price. It was the ideal setting for many post-war American families. Let's rev up our engines and find out how this new way of life contributed to the post-war economy. As we take Mia Lightning through the heart of the city, notice the buzzing factories and the sparkling new gadgets in store windows. What's driving all this prosperity and growth? Let's break it down, gear by gear. First gear, industrial growth. Remember how the US's factories greatly increased the amount of goods they could produce for World War II? After the war, these factories were still there, ready to produce lots of products. Americans with new high-paying factory jobs from the war had money to spare. But the average American didn't need a tank. What do you predict these factories did now that they didn't need to make things for the war? They shifted from making weapons and other war products to creating things for everyday life, like cars, TVs, and washing machines. Our second gear is consumerism, which is the belief that personal happiness and social status are measured by the amount and quality of goods and services one can purchase. Companies manufacturing new products in massive quantities needed to sell them fast. How do companies convince people to buy their products? They launched advertising campaigns to promote the idea of consumerism in American society. With all these advertisements and stable money from factory jobs, Americans started buying, well, everything. Refrigerators, TVs, and cars like Miacademy here became part of what made someone seem successful. These two gears, industrial growth and consumerism, were like the perfect recipe for prosperity. They transformed the United States into a powerhouse of economic growth and set the stage for a decade of remarkable change. But, as idyllic as it seems, some of the issues in society that were present before and during the war reappeared during this time. Who do you think might have been left out of the benefits of the post-war boom? Let's shift gears and delve into the cultural changes of the era and see who was included in this dream and who was left out. Let's take a pit stop and grab some food. This period was not just defined by economic boom and quaint suburbs, but also by cultural transformations. Here, in places like this diner, a new teenage culture became a cultural phenomenon. For the first time, teenagers had their own culture, music, and fashion. Rock and roll echoed through the streets, and cars like Miacademy became a symbol of freedom. How would you feel if popular music was being made for your age group for the first time? We'll take a closer look at the power of rock and roll in an upcoming lesson. But let's hit the brakes for a moment. Some groups were intentionally left out of this prosperity and cultural boom. Racial segregation and gender roles kept many Americans from joining in on this so-called American dream. In many parts of America, black families were restricted to living in certain neighborhoods, often with limited access to resources and opportunities. While suburbs sprang up and flourished, these segregated communities faced barriers that made the suburban dream and its promise of a better life out of reach. For example, banks refused to lend to black families looking to buy homes in the new suburb developments, a process known as redlining. This kept black families out of the predominantly white neighborhoods, even when they were legally allowed to live there. Another group whose voice was often missing from the American dream during this time was women. Men were supposed to be breadwinners, and women homemakers. However, during the war, women took on roles traditionally held by men, gaining independence. When the war ended and men returned home to reclaim their jobs, society expected women to resume their roles as homemakers to reintegrate the returning soldiers back into the workforce. This often meant women had to leave the position that they had held during the war. Yet many women were reluctant to return to domestic life. As we cruise through these bustling streets, answer the question, how do you think these groups of people will respond to being left out of the American dream? This period, while marked by traditional values, also witnessed the early signs of change. Marginalized groups advocated for inclusion and rights, which laid the groundwork for the large movement of the 1960s that we'll explore in the next lesson. Our journey through the fabulous 50s has come to an end, but the impact of this era lives on. It was a time that set the stage for the massive changes of the 60s and beyond, reminding us that progress often comes hand in hand with challenge. Because remember, shaping the future begins with understanding the past. Hey, hey.